So I'm just going to ask the panelists very quickly just to introduce themselves and their business so people kind of get an idea of who they are and what their business does. So maybe I'll start at that end, Nathan, and maybe you wouldn't mind just quickly introducing yourself and what you do.
Good morning, everyone. Is that working?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. I'm Nathan Mark. I'm COO of a company called DWS. Thank you ever so much for inviting us today, Matt. Really appreciate it. If you don't know DWS, just to really quickly position us, 2 million SMBs out there in the market. Less than 1% of them have got any IT resource dedicated to their business. And that's where resellers come in. There's about 15,000 expert technology resellers across the UK that are increasingly solving those problems for SMBs. What we do is we operate an aggregation platform that makes it really easy for all of those partners to access best-of-breed IT, comms, and cloud software, products, and services and deliver that out to market. So that's what we do. Just by context as well, less than 10% of our revenues is in kind of UCaaS, which I know is a lot of the subject here. About 2/3 of our revenue is in mobile and fiber services, and the other third is in cloud services. So we're kind of, we're very much aggregating across the top of the capabilities that you hear about today.
Great. And next we've got Andrew from Gamma.
Hello, is that working?
Yeah.
Yep, okay, fantastic, great. There's a button on here that says mute, but who knows what that does. So I think probably a lot of people know me. I've been in the game quite a long time. I'm Andrew Belshaw. These days I'm the CEO of Gamma, so hello, probably the first time I've met you in that capacity. I took over that role last summer from Andrew Taylor. Again, I think probably most people know Gamma. I mean, we started out as a UK business. We're selling a lot of UCaaS product, increasingly CCaaS as well, through small business through the channel in the UK. We also have a large enterprise business in the UK, and as of 2-3 years ago, we've expanded out into Europe. So we now have operations in the Netherlands, in Germany, and also in Spain. And I'm going to Spain this afternoon because it's snowing here. So
yeah.
I'm going to go and see our business in Barcelona a bit later today. But that's Gamma.
And William, probably a business not everybody will have heard of, other than I put you up in the middle earlier, so you'll have people have seen Call Tower. So introduce yourself and Call Tower.
Sure. Well, Matt, first, thanks for having us here, and I love doing this at 5 o'clock in the morning Eastern. It's really good. So it does help. My name is William Rubio. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Call Tower. Over at Call Tower, we have been primarily a U.S. and North American really organization, but have expanded over the last 10 years into EMEA and also to APAC. We currently really provide UCaaS and CCaaS in kind of in a unique way. We take platforms like Microsoft, Zoom, Cisco, and we could provide those independently, or we could actually provide them in a hybrid role and integrate them together depending on the needs of the actual business units. We currently today service roughly about 70 to 80 countries overall, and really happy to be here. So looking forward to the discussion.
Great. And Martin?
Yeah, Martin Klaassen. I would say most of you know in Reach, we are a leader in what we call and what we define as converged contact solutions. And it means actually that we are bringing UCaaS, cloud, a contact center, to basically together with our fixed voice services, mobile services, SMS. So we believe that all of these services will converge, moving it together. We are in 12 countries with 1,200 people, and most important here, we are serving 7,000 resellers and also service providers. I'm, as Chief Product Officer, one of the guys you mentioned in your keynote, so product strategy, and I also truly believe that we need to look at the market, what is going on, and that we need to reinvent part of the business which we are doing in a new way.
Great. I can't remember if you're an optimist or a mathematician, but
if you talk about myself, I'm more of the mathematical.
Yes.
I'm more of the technical and mathematical guys, but we have many optimists in the company.
Mainly in our investors normally. And Patrick, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Matt. So I'm Patrick from Destiny, and Destiny, I think many of you know us as well. We are today most known for our UCaaS solutions, but we actually power more than 3 million mobile-first users today. We have 2 different go-to-markets. So we have our country strategy, where we are present in 6 countries in Europe, and then we also have our global service provider program, where we have access to more than 300 service providers today, which deploy our solutions globally. I think what we talk about the product side, we believe that business communication is not something that is easily captured anymore with UCaaS, for example. You know, I'm old enough to be when we talked about VoIP. UCaaS is from my perspective, already something in the past. We are past that point and at a converged situation where we need to play well with others and a rapidly changing landscape where we need to provide it in a customer-first perspective.
Great. So the first question was, I put up some thoughts earlier about how the business model might be changing and how we think areas that the business model for service providers might be changing. And maybe we'll start at the end with Nathan, because you kind of have a slightly different, you have a maybe more of a converged approach and thought about it. Maybe you could just give us your thoughts of how you're seeing that change and where you think the...
Yeah, and without wishing to, make you smile, Matt, I agree with your synopsis. I think there's a couple of really significant changes that are happening for our resellers when they're selling into small businesses. The first thing I'd say is, so I started my career in telecoms back in Ericsson about 30 years ago, and at that time we were in a world of monoliths, weren't we? We were selling MD110s and business phones and that stuff. And if you were a reseller of those services, you would make your money out of a very complicated CLI and configuring those things. And you make all your money from support contracts and Max. Wouldn't you remember Max? The really interesting thing I think about UCaaS platforms, and I've seen this with, particularly I've seen Gamma and I've seen Destiny's interfaces, is these interfaces are far more user-friendly these days. And you really don't need super tech. And we've just seen a great demo, haven't we, of how easy these interfaces are. So you can't make money, I don't think, unless you're in the very large enterprise in those areas anymore. It's really changed. And what we're seeing in our resellers going out to small businesses is that small businesses are saying, I don't just want you to solve my unified communications problem for me, I want you to solve the whole thing for me and give me one hand to shake to solve that problem. So what does that mean? Well, if we think about that kind of PBX monolith, what the cloud's done really is it's kind of exploded it, hasn't it? So it's split up into loads of different services, and we can buy best-of-breed services in the cloud all over the place. Now, for my resellers, that doesn't just mean building a unified comms solution. It means, sure, integrating into Teams. That's one potential option. But, of course, a lot of my resellers are asking for the full modern workplace solution to take out to their customers, not just Teams, but 365, all those other services. If we then think about the joy of unified comms, of course, it's about anywhere, any place, isn't it? Any device. So resellers need skills in things like identity and access management. That's a really important one. How do we make these things work on these on various devices? That's dead important. Single sign-on becomes really important because you can't just drop a solution on and then suddenly the user's got to sign into loads of different applications. Integration services become really important. And then, of course, things like management become really important across the stack. And then the biggest one of all, I'm pretty much running through your architecture here, Matt, is security, and how do we deliver security, yeah? And I think what I've just described there is what a modern managed services reseller does, what a modern managed services partner does. And I absolutely agree with the synopsis. Margins in Sagia getting thinner, margins in the UCaaS product and value in the UCaaS product, it's becoming more commoditized. And what we're seeing our resellers do is really build out a set of services across all of that really differentiate them. And the key for them is to then build a workbook around that, build a run book around that so that they can deploy it again and again and again and again, particularly into small business. So that's what we're seeing.
Andrew, so where do you see Gamma's business changing and what are you thinking?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with a lot of what Nathan said, and to the extent I don't, it's probably because I'm ignorant rather than because I disagree with you. I think, as you were sort of saying, we see the world increasingly differently, I think, between enterprise customers and small business. As you were saying, enterprise is a lot more about us providing a managed service, helping people knit things together, helping CIOs get the solution that they want, or indeed solve the problem that they want, because they don't necessarily know the solution. At the smaller business end, you've still got a lot of small businesses who aren't quite sure what they want. I take your point. I think it's becoming harder for channel partners to kind of add value, but that's our job. Our job is to work with our partners to understand the problems of small business, to help them add value, and that's how they're going to make money. you know, it's funny, isn't it? As Elon Musk sort of said today, there is a place for actually talking rather than just sort of tweeting each other. And we shouldn't kind of lose sight of the fact that, you know, voice isn't dead, and you can come up with all these kind of complicated solutions, but fundamentally people just want to talk to each other, they want to communicate. And I think sometimes at the smaller end of the business spectrum, you can perhaps overcomplicate stuff. So I think our job is to just help our partners provide simple solutions into their customers, into end users, to solve the problems they've got that aren't as complicated as enterprise as of today. But I think as well, you know, you kind of picked up on the point, and Matt sort of said, how's it changing? I think it is going to change. You know, things like IT, things like, you know, modern workplace, things like security, those are things that are going to come more and more to the fore. And again, it's our job to work with our partners to provide them with the products and the service wrap around those products that enable them to serve those end users.
And one thing you mentioned that you made some acquisitions to support those things, but around customer engagement and contact center as well, I think has been a kind of, the Gamma events I've been to recently seem to be pushing quite strongly on that as well. Seems to be an area of quite a bit of interest.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Matt. And you know, we produced our Horizon Contact product, and I think, you know, very similar way to when we sort of produced our inbound product 10 years ago. At one level, we're almost kind of creating a market for that, actually. There's a whole bunch of small businesses that didn't know they needed omni-channel communication. And again, working with our partners to begin to articulate to small businesses, maybe they've got a need that they didn't know about. And again, this is about how you kind of create value again. You're always going to make money if you can create value. So where you can go into a small business and say, you know, it's not about voice anymore, although, as Elon Musk said, voice is very important. It is about omni-channel increasingly. And we now have the products to enable you as a small business to exploit that at a reasonable price point. And again, that just sort of opens up an opportunity for us to grow and for our partners to grow.
And William, maybe from a different perspective, maybe you can give us a bit of I know you're international and EMEA and flying around the world a lot now, but also you're very strong in the US market. Can you give us kind of your view, and maybe if there's any differences you see from, you know, we often hear, I don't always believe it when I go there, that the US market's more mature and sophisticated. I'm not wholly convinced about that. I think that's a state-by-state decision. But, you know, what are you seeing there and what are you seeing internationally? How are you seeing the kind of business model you had changing over time? Because it's been quite an interesting journey that Call Tower has gone through in terms of your business as well.
Yeah, it's really changed over the last few years. I mean, if we were sitting here 3 years ago, the leaders right now in UCaaS that we're talking about have completely changed, right? I think when you start looking at the emergence of Microsoft, that they're now touting somewhere around 12 million users, enabling the voice part of Microsoft Teams, and there's still a lot of greenfield there with roughly about 300 million users on Teams. That's a lot of greenfield, right, for folks that want to convert over or go to Operator Connect or some type of direct routing. But at the same time, and you brought this up earlier, Matt, when you look at things like Zoom just announced that they're at about 5.5 million users using Zoom Phone, which 3-4 years ago, before the pandemic, Zoom really wasn't a household name. Yeah. You know, and it really changed. And then when you look at the likes of Cisco kind of making somewhat of a comeback with WebEx, numbers a little bit skewed because it's a lot of folks coming from prem-based call managers to WebEx, but I think it was around June, they said about 7 million users on WebEx. So that's a big shift when you look at some of who were the leaders a few years ago that no longer are even in the top 3, right? And you've seen the valuations and so forth drop. So I think there's been a convergence there of those key platforms, but where the money's at or where the margins at are really where the value-added resellers like ourselves can really either integrate those platforms or just provide other products to really drive that ARPU and at the same time to really differentiate your product, right? So I kind of always use the analogy, and I am not a car guy at all, but use the idea of a car, and you have the chassis of the car, and then what else can you do to that car, whether it's the sunroof, the doors, the radio, the GPS, right, to really make it kind of work, and I think that's where the differentiator comes in. We are seeing in the U.S. that something like a Microsoft Teams is a little bit more mature than what we're seeing over in EMEA and over in APAC. Outside of the UK, I think the UK and the US are kind of leading, and that emergence are kind of moving towards more of a Microsoft Teams or more of a hosted platform than some of the others overall. But going back to one of your stats, Matt, that you had back in August of 22, said there was only about 20%, it was about 18 actually, that are currently in the cloud today of all the UCaaS users. So there's still a lot of opportunity there to grow both in North America and also in EMEA and APAC as well.
And your journey is interesting because you've kind of moved into that enablement. If I was to look at your website, which occasionally we do actually as an analyst team, we look at what people are messaging. I mean, you've moved very much into that enablement kind of messaging, you know, helping those, driving those platforms where if I went to look back 3 or 4 years ago, you'd have been all about your own platform play, you know, rather than that model. So that has been, you know, quite interesting to see how you've changed.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, you still got to have a play for the SMB, and then you have to have some type of combination for the mid-market and also for the enterprise business overall. We still leverage our meta switch a lot that we have for a lot of our customers, and probably, I'd say for every 10 customers going that are going with one of those core platforms of Cisco or Microsoft, et cetera, probably 8 of them are using some type of version of our meta switch as well. So we are enabling that overall, but yeah, it's definitely changed over the last few years.
Yeah, so that small business, you've still got that, like we said earlier, there's still a big, it's not all about the enablement platform.
No, absolutely. Yep.
Interesting. Great. And Martin, you are you play a couple of different roles here because you are a platform provider and have been for many years in a couple of different forms, and you're also in the market as a provider, you know, in a number of markets directly. So be interested in your sort of your dual perspective, and you also operate in a number of different markets and quite mature in those markets. So I wondered what your how you're seeing the world change.
Yeah, so when you look actually at the last 3 years, and I also remember the slide you brought up from 2020, then I think the market fundamentally shifted in the last years. And when you look at companies like Enreach or also Gamma, Destiny, then we are playing in multiple dimensions of the portfolio, and we also did sometimes similar, but sometimes also different things. So for Enreach, we saw very early that with the big hyperscalers coming into our business, it will be more and more difficult to make margin on the lower side of the stack. So we clearly strategically moved basically up the stack, and in the last years added cloud, contact center services, a productivity business, which was also on your slide on the left and on the right, so pretty nice. And we also truly believe that at the end, communication and contact between people and systems is part of the business process. So we have basically also added conversational artificial intelligence to basically automate these kind of services in the business workflow. So we truly believe that moving forward, we can create much more value when you move up in the stack with integrated contact and communication services into the business workflow. And then on top of this, we are providing these kind of services as a service provider in 12 countries, that's right. We have 7,000 partners and also service providers, and we take the full portfolio which we have and help our partners to differentiate on top of the stack even more with services. So it's not only about the car features, it's about the services on top of this, because this where we believe for service providers that can really create value moving forward.
So what sort of services, just so give a flavor, because I struggle.
So when you look actually on the stack on the top, then we as a platform vendor with the portfolio, we don't know many of your local markets. We don't know how to differentiate in the SMB space in a special vertical. So for basically us as Enreach, it's really to provide the basic technology for US service providers to differentiate into verticals, differentiate into local markets, and make a difference with the knowledge you have because you are closer to the customer.
Great, cool. And last but not least, sorry Patrick, I'll be a bit fairer next time so you're not at the end, but you've got a very similar, you personally drove the Telepo business for many years and built the platform, and then, and Destiny has very similarly has some different aspects of the market. So like your perspective from maybe both sides, how you see it changing for your service provider customers that you're serving, and then maybe also as you as a service provider.
Yeah, as you said, there are many things that changed the last couple of years, but fundamentally it's the same. It's about people's need to communicate, and most people don't care about technology, so we need to make it easy for them. So I think the first starting point was really the pandemic, when things started to change a lot, and that was actually a big help for probably most of us here in the panel, because what we were preaching before actually happened in a much faster way than we thought we could actually do it. Before, we were always optimistic, and all of a sudden it happened much faster. The other thing that sort of led to a rapid change in the pandemic was that all of a sudden people really saw how small the UCaaS market was compared to the potential market. So instead of just looking a little bit inside out, saying, hey, we are great because we are one of the largest UCaaS providers, we actually turn it around a bit. And so how we could collaborate and get more, let's say, benefits for the end users by starting in different angles. So that's when we changed the strategy a bit, and instead of looking at how to provide value on top of a UCaaS provider, doing contact centers, customer engagement, things outside that, and also integrations and analytics, we started to turn it around and looking at how we can provide all of these things on all of the big, let's say, platforms that are out there, and seeing how we can get a smaller piece of each cake instead of always getting the whole. So I think that was the biggest change in the business for us, and it's been extremely well perceived by our customers, and that's also how we try and test it in the countries where we have the other dimension, where we have 6 different countries in Europe that actually are our flagship store. So they take our portfolio, bundle it with local knowledge and local services and local capabilities, and then prove it.
Okay. And where I want to move the debate on to now is, where should you build, buy, so one of the big questions for service providers right now is, we've talked about enablement, which, is an interesting model. There's other models where, they're buying a platform from somebody, they're buying it as a service, they're buying it, where should you build or buy the technology, now? Because it's kind of an interesting debate. We talked about the SME being different from the large enterprise. And maybe Patrick will let you go first on that and be a bit fairer. So, because I think actually Nathan at the end will be interesting, because he's probably doesn't really build stuff so much. Builds the middleware, but not the platform technology itself. So where do you see that balance now, between building, maybe you providing something as a cloud service to a service provider versus, enabling other platforms? I know you do a bit of all of those for service providers. So how do you see it play out?
Yeah, I think the border is actually quite fluid. So from a Destiny point of view, we do have, a clear, buy, build, or a partner, basically, strategy that is depending on both, let's say, how valuable the certain area is, the speed that is required in the area, and also sort of our capabilities in doing something fast. So we try to look at that different perspectives, and then we select what path to do depending on the opportunities. So instead of always having a starting point that, you should always do one or the other, we try to be more tactical here and really test the market and rather cooperate with others. So actually many of our competitors are also our customers. Yep. And I think that's really a strength in our go-to-market. We are not afraid of cooperating with our competitors.
Yeah, okay. And Martin, your perspective on that, when should a service provider buy technology from you? Or where should, and you as a service provider, where do you build, buy, use cloud services now? How do you think, and does it change? So we're talking about the large enterprise being maybe more dominated by certain players. So, can you build a solution that competes, or, how do you play it? How does that play out?
So I think in general, a service provider should always buy solutions from us. That's maybe the first answer.
Starting point, yeah.
For us as a vendor, we are building things when we think they have a strategic relevance and where we can really make a difference with the capabilities which we have. And I think that's also the same answer for service providers. So you need to think where you can make a difference in the marketplace, and this you should build and own, and where you should partner with basically companies like Enreach or others, because when you don't have the scale to do something yourself and you cannot make a difference, then you should buy up or a partner, and you should really focus on building and basically owning where you can make a difference in the marketplace. That's our strategy.
Okay. And so areas, I mean, both of you bought chatbot types businesses and customer engagement businesses, I guess, were areas that you were seeing as important in the future So it's worth bringing in those assets and having those skills, for instance.
That's even a very interesting example. So for those who probably don't saw, there was a press notice yesterday. We got actually an award on our artificial intelligence platform. This is something which we as Enreach, bought as an acquisition. We are building this forward, but we are also providing this to service providers, because with your knowledge of verticals and the customer segments, you can build solutions with language models on top of this to really make a difference in the market. So we are providing basic technology, and you can make a difference with your own intellectual property on top of this.
Okay, and William, you mentioned earlier, so you've still got a platform that you run and you manage, I guess, as a Metaswitch platform, which you serve your domestic SME customers with. And then you've gone for an enablement model, I guess, internationally and with some of the larger mid-market. And so how does that decision look for you? When do you think it makes sense to kind of build or enable, or where does it look sense?
Well, so we enable a couple different, I guess, verticals or channels. First, obviously, we're a B2B organization, so we look at our customers and what the demand are, but we also do have a lot of our customers that are SMBs, other service providers as well. And what we try to build is, first we build a portal called Call Tower Connect. Everybody uses the word connect, but we build that really integrates all these different platforms together. And then at the same time is, when could we differentiate ourselves and build a product that is basically platform agnostic, that does have an API that could really drive into Connect. So whether it be something as simple as text messaging that we could do on Zoom, that we could do on Cisco, that we could do on Microsoft Teams, that enables our partners to differentiate themselves. And the MSPs that are out there, the VARs, those type of partners have the relationship with the customers, and that's what they're looking for to really differentiate their product. So I think if you could bring that to the table and enable that, not just for the large enterprise, because everybody wants a large enterprise, but let's not forget about the SMB, which still makes up 80% of the business. You want to make sure that you have a combination of both.
So where you're definitely building is the kind of middle, I call it middleware, it's probably the wrong sense, but that and a stack in between maybe some of your own assets, other people's assets, but that's an important area where you want to own, I guess, and build the...
Yeah, the middleware is really just to communicate back and forth, right? To make sure that it is available for everybody. So if I have an MSP that says, I want to be your customer, and I want to make sure that I can enable my customers to do X, Y, and Z, but I want to be that front interface for my customer, you have to be able to go ahead and provide that to those MSPs to go ahead and do that.
And Andrew, you've had some different approaches. You've obviously been a very big reseller of Cisco for a while in the core platform. Not reseller because you run your own platform, but but then recently you made a few acquisitions on about buying your own platform. Where do you see the areas that make sense for you to invest and build, and the areas that you're kind of happier to partner? And
I mean, comms has always been an odd world, hasn't it? In that your competitors are your suppliers and your customers, and I'm sort of sitting on a panel with a number of competitors. I'm selling Patrick's product in Germany. I'm selling Martin's product in Spain. I've got a valued customer here, and yet we're all competitors as well. And somehow we all kind of manage to get along, and we'll go for a drink afterwards, and it's all great. And it was kind of ever thus. And I think the reality of comms has been, is, and always will be, you can't do everything. And if you look at the businesses that perhaps are trying to do everything, they're not making very much money. And it does sort of behove us to actually sit down and evaluate everything and work out exactly what you're going to buy, what you're going to license in, and what you're going to build yourself. And the economics of those will be different, and the economics of those will be changing. So it might be that at a point in time, at the moment, I'm a very happy customer of both Destiny and OnReach in different territories. At a point in time, we might be selling something different in those territories, or selling something alongside those territories. We've bought a couple of businesses where we've started building our own products. So we now sell our own collaboration software, and we no longer take that from BroadSoft. So it kind of moves and it evolves, and you just kind of have to evaluate it on a case-by-case basis, I think, as you go through. But you simply can't do everything. And I suppose just one final point, even across the market, at the small and medium-sized end, I'm much more likely to try and sort of build something. At the enterprise end, we're not even selling. We're walking into customers, they've got Teams licenses. We don't sell Teams licenses. We're just helping them fire that product up and make it work. We're not even selling it to them. So it's just hugely varying. It's always going to change. And I think, a good business doesn't try and do everything itself, because you can't and you won't make money. You've just got to place your chips where you think you're going to place your chips. And it's a fantastic ecosystem to be part of, because I think we genuinely all want to kind of help each other and work together to do things, I think. But correct me if I'm wrong. Patrick's nodding, so that's okay. Martin's a bit more quiet. Nathan.
Nathan, so from your perspective, you generally don't, well, you do a sort of a variation of that. So where do you see it? Because I think you've got a slightly different angle.
Well, I'm trying to think where I start here, because there's our buy, build partner strategy, and then there's me trying to talk on behalf of my resellers and what they're doing. So if we start with us, the first thing is that we provide this aggregation platform, and my vision for that is I'd like that to be the Amazon for the channel, an incredible, simple experience where partners can get everything. So that's where we're building. That's where we're investing really heavily in making that environment as simple as possible. But I think there are some really interesting opportunities there as well, because if we look at how we really help our resellers, largely those experiences are either for the more advanced partners, our API integrations, or they're old-fashioned portals. And actually, I think there is a really significant opportunity for us to create applications that make that whole journey for partners easier, that are embedded into our resellers' organizations. So I think that's where we are in terms of our aggregation platform. If I then think about the other aspects of where we're thinking about M&A, we absolutely think that we would benefit from more scale in certain areas. The tricky thing for us, of course, always is the scarcity of assets that are indirect, that are channel only. So that's a real challenge for us. And also really interesting one as well, and it's great. I think we've seen Gamma do this exceptionally well, is really think about how do we enable our partners without taking margin away from our partners and building capabilities. So we're seeing a lot of requirement now for, in particular, skills around Azure PaaS services, around security services. So it's now not just teaching a partner to fish, but it's also standing alongside them and offering services to help them to deliver, particularly into small businesses. So that's important. So that's kind of where DWS is. It's interesting, though, if you then reflect on resellers and where they're going. I mean, I was walking from the station this morning. I saw that Matt at Babel had just made another really significant acquisition of a Microsoft partner. Okay. Probably the biggest one today. I think, it looks like a very good acquisition for them. And I've been with 3 partners this week who've all got different approaches. I was with a very small partner of ours last week at an event, and we've helped them to get their Microsoft Silver status. They're a telco reseller, and they've entirely themselves done that. And now we're starting to see their numbers clock up on CSP, selling Microsoft services and doing it themselves. I was with another partner yesterday who has not gone down the private equity route, has raised their, using their own profits and taken some bank debt, and they have been acquiring into the IT space so that they can broaden out from being telco. And then, of course, we see all of the buy and builds that you mentioned before, like Focus, Babel, Arrow, Southern, and the rest of them that are doing what they're doing. So I think it's a real mix. The one thing I would say is that although if we look, so we have about 6,000 resellers buying on our platform. I don't think it's fair at the moment to say that there is no market for pure comms players selling into SMB. There clearly still is. To Andrew's point, we still need to speak to each other and to our customers. That never goes away. But where we are seeing the partners deliver the most growth is where they are getting broader now, because the end customer is demanding that. They don't want to call lots of different places to fix their problems. Like with your laptop problem this morning, Matt, wouldn't it be great if someone just came up and fixed the lot for you?
It would have been.
Yeah, and that's what the SMB wants. So that's what our resellers, I think, are now in various ways trying to create.
So that interesting area leads us on to where you should play in the stack. And I mean, one of the things I tend to tell the same story, so people have heard me a few times get a bit bored. But this idea of home office now, the world's changed, and how do we serve those customers? So, in my office, somebody might solve my Microsoft stuff. They might solve my my stuff at home. So we heard about security earlier. I think we talked about that. How do you see where you play in the stack, do you start to offer different things? Is the changes, are you now getting into having to offer, and you may do it already, so I don't know, but sort of home office equipment? Have you seen a change through the pandemic in terms of resellers looking for different solutions? I remember I was in a reseller, I think it was a Gamma reseller event, and there was a guy who said he was really looking for heat sensors linked to his solution. He was running hotels, and at the peak of the pandemic, he was trying to get hold of people doing that. Have you seen a change? And is that forcing you to go into different places?
There is a change, but what I would say about the reseller channel is it's full of some of the most brilliant, sharp entrepreneurs that you will ever meet. And they're all, and they are brilliant at making money, and they will go where the opportunity is. So they will leverage, your slide earlier talked about service and local service being absolutely critical. So their reputation is everything, but with that great reputation, we're seeing SMBs say, absolutely, I will buy more and more and more from you, whatever that is. So we have seen, yes, we've seen a tick up in basic hardware services, device services, room systems, those sorts of things. So we do see that. It's not really a critical part of what we do, but we do it as an addition.
Yeah.
But then, I think we've got pretty much all the breadth in the key product areas, but what we're now always looking to do, because the market's moving so fast, particularly in software as a service, you've seen it, you'll see brilliant examples today of products that didn't exist 2 years ago that suddenly everyone wants. So, being really, really cute and being able to enable partners to deliver that stuff out and make money from it.
So Andrew, maybe we talk about an area, kind of pick up on a few areas. So one of the areas we talked about, was this security, the myth of security. Everybody says, the next logical area is to go into security, and kind of everybody goes yes, but nobody quite understands fully what they really mean quite often when they say that. Where are the areas you think in terms of the stack, either your resellers, security is a logical one, I guess, that people are looking at. Is there any other areas of the stack you're thinking you or your resellers might need to sort of move into?
It's the perennial question, isn't it, Matt? I'm a bit of a skeptic on security, not because it's not important, but I've noticed that as businesses are putting themselves up for sale, suddenly security becomes quite important to them because maybe you get another 1 or 2 turns on the price. But that's just me being a little bit cynical. I'm sure they're not doing that. But yeah, cyber is the one that absolutely everybody sort of talks about. In our world, kind of the adjacencies of things like IT, things like desktop, and increasing, one of our businesses in the Netherlands provides a whole bunch of sort of desktop support services to small and medium-sized businesses as well. I kind of come back, Matt, it's that difference between what we do and what our partners do and how we help our partners excel. And it may well be in due course that our partners, they need to expand their services, they need to get into heat sensors or whatever. I'm not going to sell them heat sensors because I can't do it well and I can't add value to it. And that's why I sort of keep coming back to, our job is just to sort of be aware of where the market's going and then just pick the things that we're going to come.
But what you might do is provide an ecosystem of people where they could go, or the integrations into those things, rather than being, that seems to be one of the trends we're hearing from the panel is, you might provide the integration layer to some of those things, or even just the ecosystem. Here's somebody who could help you, sort of thing. It might be part of how things move forward.
It may very well be. I mean, as we sit here today, do I sort of? I guess it depends how broad your question is. Certainly in sort of comms business, UCaaS, CCaaS, we obviously do that. We obviously will do that. As you get broader and broader, I mean, I don't know, and it is exactly where you draw the boundary around that. Are we going to become a sort of business Amazon where you can buy literally almost certainly not. But yeah, you will do more and more, of course.
So, William, be interested in your perspective of what you've seen. Are there new services and new areas of the stack that you've gone into in the last few years that you maybe didn't think you were going to, or where you think you're going?
Yes, security hasn't been one of them. One other thing, though, Andrew, we got to meet after this because I got to sell you some services you're buying from everybody else, but not from us here. So we got to take care of that after this. But what we're actually seeing right now is there is also a convergence overall when you look at compliance issues and regulatory issues, and when you look at even those large UCaaS providers, they're really not trying to be in the voice area, right? Zoom, Microsoft, Cisco, et cetera. They say, yeah, we'll sell you some voice, but they're not really into that. They're really trying to enable partners like us. And then when you work with somebody that has the regulatory and the compliance done in 70, 80 countries or so forth. We have a lot of partners coming to us, and we've seen that as a differentiator for us. We haven't ventured into security. I don't think we are going to here. At least it's not on the roadmap for right now, because you want to, like Andrew mentioned, you want to make sure that you're good at something and just kind of stick to it.
What about rooms? Are you, because you're selling all this collaboration, do you do any room technologies? Or?
We're seeing an uptick in the equipment requirements for the rooms, and now I think there was a stat that said about 3% of the rooms globally have actually equipment for video services. So there's a big opportunity there.
Okay. And Martin, in terms of the areas of the stack you're thinking, you think are really interesting based on what the guy, anything new, what the guys have said? Or areas that you're seeing interesting new areas, to move into?
So I think in what we saw in the last years is, again, that for basically us, it's important to move up the stack to have higher valued services. And then it depends actually where you can make a difference. So what I truly believe is that going from UCaaS more and more stronger into the cloud contact center space is very, very important, as Andrew also said, because there's a lot of SMEs customers who run a contact center, but they don't know. Yeah? So that's the reason why we have also acquired 3 cloud contact center businesses in the last years, and we are integrating them into our portfolio. Then bringing the business process even stronger into the CRM and ERP world, I think, is an important one. Again, moving higher in the stack and adding automation capabilities towards the business workflows. So I think these are very important things where we as a vendor and service provider can create value, and where also our partners and also service providers can create value. And another thing which is really important, we talked about integration platforms, middleware, visioning. So we truly believe we need to make it very easy for our partners and service providers to consume, provision, brand all these kind of services, because service providers at the end need to bring their own brand forward. We do have a full wholesale white labeled solution. We have the automation platform. So we need to make it easy for you to extend the portfolio which you sell. So in our view, it's not only about the products, it's also about the fulfillment processes and everything around to make the sell, fulfill, and the customer lifetime easy.
And last but not least, Patrick, from your perspective, where do you see you going in the things we've heard? Do they resonate? Are there new different things that you're thinking about?
No, it definitely resonates. I think from Destiny point of view, we haven't really decided to go up or down in the value chain or in the stack, but what we have done is focused a lot on the areas where we need to provide innovation and attach that to different systems. So we see today, for example, that what's happening in Teams and Zoom and Cisco WebEx, all of these is opportunities for us where we can apply our customer engagement technologies, we can apply our analytics technology. So key for us is keep innovating fast in a way that puts the user and the service provider also in a good spot. I agree with Martin. We spend a lot of time on the customer journey and making sure that we map that and map personas in terms of really meeting the needs and not just creating technology. I think the world is moving too fast to sort of create things from a technology perspective.
And analytics is an interesting one because you made an acquisition in that space, Meridix, right? And so that's an interesting area. We talked about contact center and some of the other areas. That's quite an interesting kind of area, I think, of growth, and there's been quite a lot of interest.
Yes, so for us, I mean, the starting point of that acquisition was what it did on top of our UCaaS, and that's obviously the initial part, how to accelerate that and help our service providers be better at that. But the next step was quickly to get to the point where we now have it working on top of a number of contact centers. So we have it working on top of BroadSoft, on Microsoft Teams, and so on. So you don't have to use our UCaaS solution to benefit from the analytics part. And here we see tremendous opportunities to also move into sentiment and analytics that will come later this year to make sure that you can provide more value for SMEs that, need the services and need the help. How is your support actually working? Did they not only sort of be answered with the questions, did they actually leave, being happy or not?
We're over time slightly, but it's my event, so I can kind of do those sorts of things. People get angry at the back, but, at the end of the day. Is there anybody got but I've asked a lot of questions. Anybody got a burning question? We've got a really great panel. I just wonder if anybody had anything they wanted to ask. If not, we can move on. But if there was somebody there who was thinking, gosh, no, that's good. It's good and bad, really. Depends how you see it, doesn't it? But great. Well, on that, I will thank the panelists. Really great panel. Thank you very much for supporting the event and coming along on this, well, snowy day. And yeah, just a round of applause for the panel, please. If you'd like to exit stage.